Hello, and welcome back to Things I Want My Kids to Know with me, Ted Bradshaw. Today, we're going to talk about expressing and holding boundaries. This is on my mind, I suppose, for a couple of different reasons. One of which is to do directly with my kids. So they've been taught at school a method or something to do when somebody's doing something you don't like, and that is to hold your hand out in front of you, palm out, and just say stop very, very clearly. And I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it because they've kind of been taught as well that it's all right to do that quite aggressively, and I like that. And one of my daughters in particular has really taken that on board. She's really taken that on board, which, for the purposes or for my hopes for her as she grows, into an adult, is that she can hold on to that. Right now, it also means that she's maybe using it liberally, let's say, and she'll find her way through that. But I'd much rather it was that way around, in a way that everybody felt comfortable saying what their boundaries are, and worked on having to navigate other people's boundaries too, rather than feeling like you can't express your boundaries, or you're not allowed to, or you have to put other people's rights or needs before them, I suppose. So this is going to be one of those where I'm, I suppose, talking more directly to my kids. I know sometimes I'm talking about a theory, but today there's some theory, I suppose, but I just want to say some things that I believe about this and what I want them to know. One of the things that I want them to know is, or I really hope, is that as they grow and they develop into adults, that they have a right to their boundaries, that they have a voice, that they can use that voice, and to believe that the correct response when you've told somebody what you do or don't like or do or don't want, that they should take that seriously. And in particular, if you've made it clear that you really don't like something, a reasonable person should be taking that on board and stopping it. Now, there are obviously times when somebody else might want something and that competes. So as an example, sometimes my kids, they'll be in the same room and one of them wants to do something noisy and the other one's trying to do something quiet. So one of them's reading and another one comes in and plays piano. That paints them out as if they're little sort of angelic creatures. Let's be clear about that. That's not necessarily a fair example. It could easily just be making an irritating noise while the other person's trying to draw a cartoon character or something. And you might say, one of them might say, stop that, I don't want you to do that. But the other one might say, but I want to do this. How are we supposed to resolve that? That would be an example of both things are not completely unreasonable, I suppose, or they don't massively impinge upon the other person, but they impinge enough. And how are you supposed to resolve that? Whereas that's slightly different to if you're like poking somebody or doing something that kind of invades their personal space or makes them feel distressed in some way and they're not listening to you, the person doing the poking is in the wrong. That's very kind of clear, if you like. But either way, that the correct response is for somebody to take it seriously. So just even as an example, I was tickling my daughter the other day just as part of a game and she said stop and I didn't stop and she shouted it again, and quite rightly she was upset with me, like, you didn't listen. And again, like, as part of the game of what we were doing, I wasn't intending to impinge on any boundaries, but I want her. I like that she believes that this is the way around it should be. This is the way around it should be. That you should respect that. And that is only a good thing, I would say. So my default response is to try and defend myself, like, oh, I didn't mean to, type thing. But that's kind of not the point. The point is, like, I'm sorry, I should have listened. I wasn't trying to be annoying, but you're right, I should have listened. And part of my rationale for that really is I wanted to have grown up in an environment where that's norm. That's the norm. So that if she comes across a situation where somebody's not listening and not paying attention, she can identify that. All my kids can identify that as not okay. This isn't what love is. This isn't what kind of a decent relationship is. And there's something wrong here. And the something wrong isn't me, it's you. That's what I want them to be able to believe. Boundaries can kind of come up in all sorts of different ways. So how you spend your time, unfair workloads, for example, or demands on your time, people asking of you or demanding of you your time, your energy, your mental capacity. And sometimes people are unreasonable with that. They're asking you to do things that aren't doable within the agreed kind of time, if you like, or they're perhaps it's just a bit relentless, or they're not taking on board the fact that you know more than they do what your time is like and what you can do and what you can't do. It can be physical boundaries, somebody doing something, sitting too close to you, being too noisy. It can be sort of touching you in a way that they don't want. Bullying. Or sort of boundaries around intimacy and relationships. Or how you spend your free time, frankly. That's boundaries too. Sometimes, again, people can be demanding, and if you feel you can't express what's going on for you or hold particular boundaries of saying no or pushing back on things, you might find that you don't get any free time. So for me, in terms of what do I want them to know about what it takes to be able to express and hold boundaries, for me there's a few stages to it. One is, in order to express your boundaries, you have to know what you want. So if you don't know what you want, or you don't know when something's bothering you, or you're out of touch with that, it's hard to say, this is bothering me, or I don't want it. Knowing that you have a right, this is the other thing, knowing that you have a right to express and hold your boundaries. Having the words to actually say it is another barrier. Having the confidence to say those words, and maybe dealing with conflict. And there are kind of barriers at each of those levels, but I suppose I just want to focus on a few principles. And the first thing I want to say is, you are worth protecting. You are worth protecting. No matter what it is, you are worth protecting. I've said it a few times now, but I'm going to say it one more time. You are worth protecting. You were born worth protecting. When you came out and you looked like a weird little spider monkey, so it looked really sort of scrawny and weird when they came out, you were worth protecting from that moment. You don't have to earn that anywhere along the road. Every living being has the right to feel safe and to have their kind of rights and wants and opinions taken seriously. Doesn't mean they always have the right to have exactly what they want. That's not the same. But you are worth protecting, and you have a right to be protected. Another thing I suppose I just want to say is that there is such a thing. One of the conflicting things I think my kids are going to get from me, which I've mentioned before, I think, is that they'll get messages about treating people with kindness and care and being considerate. And they will also, hopefully, get messages, it's good to defend yourself. And that's a right that we all have, and to say what we want. I mean, even though I'm saying this out loud, I think the middle ground is somewhere between it's okay to be understanding of what somebody else's view is, but that doesn't mean that you have to eradicate your own feelings just because you understand where they're coming from. You can still have your own feelings, even if you can see where somebody else is coming from. A small example comes from me and my wife, which is, so in the car, I like really loud music. I like really loud music, just in general. Whereas my wife has always hated that. She's like, oh, I don't like it. And a long, long time ago, I didn't used to understand. I was like, well, why not? Because in my head, loud music is good. But in hers, it's not, and we didn't really understand one another. Now I understand that she is more affected by noise than I am. So it's uncomfortable for her to listen to loud music, whereas I'm just there having the time of my life. But kind of the point is, you don't even have to understand somebody else's viewpoint, or you don't need the other person to understand your viewpoint in order to say, I don't like this and I don't want it. So it should be enough for my wife to be able to say, this bothers me. I really don't want the loud music. And for me to take that seriously. That doesn't mean that I am therefore never allowed to play loud music in my head. So I also have a right to play loud music. But what I don't have a right to do is just dominate somebody else's kind of rights, I suppose. So we're able to kind of chat about it and think about it, and what are we willing to kind of compromise here, and what's okay. But there is such a thing as being too understanding, and the too understanding part is when either we feel we have to justify the way that we feel, because you can tie yourself up in knots doing that, or when you're being so understanding that you're not challenging the behaviour. And the thing that I would say about that is you can always have a problem with the behaviour that somebody is displaying. You can always be understanding towards somebody else and still say, I really don't want you to do this. So my example would be, as a parent, how many times have you had to say this? Look, I know you're angry, but it's not okay to do what you're doing. It's not okay to throw stuff, break stuff, hit people, whatever it is. You can be understanding of the feeling and the reasoning, but the behaviour I have a problem with, this isn't okay. Even if you've got a good reason for it. I still don't like the behaviour, and I don't want you to do that. That's all right. That is one way of going around this idea of being too understanding. I think the reason this is on my mind, or one of the reasons this is on my mind, is doing the job that I do. One of my greatest fears for my kids, I think, is getting into a relationship where they're being treated unfairly and getting trapped in that, I think. Because, in my experience, that can happen to anybody. But some of the principles I'd want them to have kind of in the forefront of their mind is, you always have a right to be treated with respect. To have your physical self respected and just sort of your wants and needs respected. Again, doesn't mean that everybody has to sort of bow down and do everything you want, but you should feel respected, that you're being taken seriously. That's what we want. And again, a protective factor is, it's only a good thing to be an understanding human being, but that doesn't have to extend to letting somebody do whatever they want if it hurts you. You can always say, I don't like this. Always. And importantly, coming back around to, you don't have to justify yourself. Sometimes we can get caught up in justifying ourselves, but or we can lead with it. Sometimes one of the barriers to expressing a boundary, and certainly holding it, is feeling like you have to make an explanation. So if somebody says, can you do this for me? And you haven't got the time, you might reply with all of the reasons. Here's all the things I've got going on, so I can't do it, and I'm really sorry because I've got X, Y, and Z going on. And sometimes, with a reasonable person, they'll come back and say, sorry, I didn't realise you had that amount going on. With somebody that's unreasonable for whatever reason, they might pick holes in what you've just said. They might say, well, yeah, but why can't you leave that till Wednesday? And you might know why you can't leave that till Wednesday, because you've got something else in on Wednesday. They don't know you. When you think about it like that, it's bizarre that somebody would even argue with you about it. But when you lead with justification, in a way, actually, you think what you're doing is presenting an ironclad argument, but you're not. Really, what you're doing is you're giving somebody something they can argue with. When you lead with just the facts, which is, I don't have time for that right now, or I don't have capacity, doesn't mean you can't also offer something else, like, here's how I might do it, or offer some understanding, like, I know this needs doing, and I know this is a big deal, but right now I don't have space for that. Or I don't have space for that considering what else I've got, something else would have to go. Then you're just starting with the opening gambit. And a reasonable person who knows that they don't know your workload might say, like, okay, I didn't realise, we are going to have to find a way for it, so let's see what we can do. Or they might say, okay, I'll ask someone else, whatever it might be. Or if you've got an unreasonable person in your life, they will pick holes in whatever you say. So even going back to the music example, if you say, I don't like loud music, can you turn that down? It's bothering me. An unreasonable person, he says, speaking as if that was never me, might say, what do you mean you don't like loud music? This isn't loud. I mean, even that's just bizarre, isn't it? It's bizarre. Somebody has told you they don't like something, and you're arguing with them about whether or not they should like it. No, come on. You can say, oh, okay, to me this wasn't loud. I wasn't intending to be, cause you any problems. I didn't realise it was that loud. When does it start to become a problem for you? I like it loud. Let's see where we can find a middle ground. Or, whatever other solution there might be, which, frankly, for me is I can put it on as loud as I like whenever I want. I don't have to do it in the car. When my wife's there, it's okay. That's all right. And another final thing that I'd want them to know. So you're worth protecting. There is such a thing as being too understanding, and you can always have a problem with somebody's behaviour. And you don't have to justify yourself what you don't like. It is enough to say, in any reasonable relationship, it is enough to say, I don't like this. And that should be taken seriously. And then finally, in order to hold boundaries strongly, you don't have to become somebody that you don't like. You don't have to become an aggressive person if that's not who you are. You can hold boundaries strongly by just being still. I think one of the things that people often struggle with. So, I've got the example of, one of my kids who can do this thing about saying stop very, very strongly and could potentially take that aggressively if they wanted to. But that's not everybody's style, I suppose. I don't like being aggressive. It makes me uncomfortable. And it's not who I want to be. Don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean I don't snap at my kids sometimes, but holding boundaries, I don't want to be somebody that shouts at people or uses like physical intimidation, if you like. But what you can do, there is power in knowing that you can just be solid and still. My favourite analogy, which I know I've said before, is being a rock. You can be a rock. You don't have to be a tiger. You can be a rock. A rock is still. And no matter how fast the water flows around it, it doesn't move. And that's what you can be. An example I kind of hold in my mind a lot of the time is I would sometimes struggle with sort of challenging people on the way that they're saying things to me. And there was once at work a phone call. Somebody rang me, and I'd only just started learning some of this stuff. And somebody rang me really angry with a letter that I'd sent, trying to make a referral somewhere. And I understood why they were so upset, because the system wasn't working properly. And from this person's perspective, I was part of that system, and not only part of it, but the cause of it, if you like. But frankly, they were being really rude, and they were sort of shouting at me, and I didn't like it. And I was very proud of myself because I said, I was absolutely shaking. I want to make it very, very clear. I was sweating, sweating so badly saying this. But what I said was, look, I can understand how frustrated you are. And to be honest, I get it. Like, I'd be frustrated as well. I'd like to be able to talk about it. But to be honest, the way that you're speaking to me right now, I'm feeling really uncomfortable with and I don't like. So I'd appreciate it if we were able to talk kind of as colleagues and with a bit more respect. Is that something that you're willing to do? And they hung up on me. They hung up on me. And I was bothered by that. I can even feel it a bit in my chest now. I was bothered by that for ages afterwards, but I was still proud of myself because I didn't think there was anything wrong in what I'd said. I didn't feel I'd been rude. I didn't feel I'd become somebody that I wasn't. There was nothing I said or did there that was outside of my values. But I also didn't just let that person do whatever they like. Could have just tried to smooth it on. Frankly, thinking back on it, I probably started there by just going, I'm sorry, let's work out how we can do it, and tried to just solve it by kindness, but they weren't responding to that, I suppose. And that's something I'd want my kids to know. You don't have to be, in order to protect your boundaries and protect yourself, you don't have to become somebody that you're not. You can work on being still. And this is what I like, this is what I don't like. is that something you're willing to do or not? And whatever the other person says, we can say, okay, well, this is my terms. Are we going to go with that or not? Doesn't have to be in your face or aggressive. It can be kind, even understanding, but it can be firm. And there's a lot of power in that, I think. It can be a huge barrier to people being able to express barriers, is feeling like they have to become this sort of raging inferno. But you don't. You can be as still as a rock. So still, there's moss growing on you. Those are some of the things I want my kids to know about expressing and holding boundaries. Thank you for listening. If you want to know more, I am actually running a course on the 8th of June 2026, and I'll be running it again later in the year on boundaries, assertiveness and confidence. So if there's anything here that you'd want to know more about, we're going to go through a model of communication, which sort of talks you through that language I was using there in that final thing. So if that sounds interesting to you, check out the link in the bio or in the comments even. Thanks very much. I'll see you next time.